I've heard it suggested that Gunko is the attendant of Imu that we've seen in some scenes. So I've heard that suggested as well from you right now. And I gotta say, I don't mind the idea, because Imu's attendant is an even more mysterious character than Imu himself. At the moment, all we know is that her dialogue in the anime has a female voice, and I suppose it's very possible that this could be a member of the Holy Knights and maybe even Gunko herself. It's deliberately left very vague in both the manga and the anime, but it does look like this attendant could be wearing the same cloak as our Holy Knights are. I tell you what though, recently an old rejected character design for Thriller Bark was dug up, which is this cloaked woman in bandages, which for the purposes of Thriller Bark was probably intended to be a mummy theme, but it is very reminiscent of the Gunko we see before us today. And in fact, this rejected design looks like Imu's attendant a lot more to me than it does Gunko, but I think that Oda has been trying to implement something like this for quite a while, and it's always ended up being cut for one reason or another. Because I brought this up before, but Oda wanted to do the same thing with Black Maria and give her a fabric-based devil fruit before deciding to go full spider. I was thinking that the goggles may have been hinting that Gunko is a clone of Koala. Maybe when she was a slave, Saturn harvested her DNA. So this is the danger of living in a post-Egghead world. As soon as our first clone reveal happened during that arc, I vividly remember saying that from now until the end of One Piece, clones are going to work their way into every theory. Here's the thing though, I don't mind it. I'm not sure why Koala would be targeted specifically, but I have briefly discussed the idea of both Shanks and Frank. They may be clones of Figarland and Garling, an attempt to replicate the world government's most powersome warrior, and it almost lines up. It comes so very close, but doesn't quite get there, because Mads was founded 39 years ago, which is the exact same amount of years ago that Shanks has been alive. So it was unlikely to have been Mads, who as far as we're aware are responsible for the advent of cloning. So for this to work, Saint Saturn would have needed to have his own cloning project in place, a pretty damn successful one as well. And if so, then perhaps all of the Holy Knights are clones of figures that the world government has captured or hired. But I still have no good answer as to why they would clone a koala, unless there's something genetically special about her that we're not aware of yet, or alternate option, perhaps Koala is a clone of Gunko who was deemed a Sanji level failure and relegated to slavery as a result. And maybe not necessarily Gunko, but Gunko and Koala could be clones of someone else, like the potential Shanks and Frank's dynamic. I say potential, the cloning stuff is still very firmly rooted in crackpot nonsense. There's a lot to explain that I cannot explain, such as how Koala had a family on an island, but still it's good to bring up these ideas because 1 in every 100 crackpot weird stupid One Piece idea turns out to be correct. The other 99 times, the answer turns out to be something very simple, like Oda just made another character with a hat and some goggles. But I've just made another thing for you, and that thing is called the Calm Belt, which is a channel currently undertaking the project of re-editing the Grand Line Review video library into themed compilations. Very long videos, perfect for your very long form activities like driving, drawing, gaming, sleeping, whatever it is you do for extended periods of time, we've got you covered for as long as it takes, with no need to pause what you're doing and pick a new video every 15 minutes or so. They're not just compilations either, because throughout the years there have been what I refer to as lost videos. And these are Grand Line Review projects that were fully written, recorded, and edited. However, for various different reasons, were never published. I'm not going to tell you where they are, how many there are, or even what they are though, because that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, is it? My videos, they're yours if you want them. I left everything I own in the link in the description. So if this new long form channel meets your needs, then please do check it out and make sure to subscribe, because that is insanely important for small channels, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's get back to you, me. Thanks, me. Gunko kind of feels like Uta from film Red in that her design feels too random. I think Uta is a very good comparison, actually. One of the things I said about her when the film Red trailer started coming out is that she's a character who's both over and under-engineered. There's a lot going on, a lot of clashing elements, but there's something about it that hits a lot of very generic anime notes and doesn't really fit into the Eiichiro Oda school of design, which I guess makes sense because Oda did not create the character of Uta. However, he did design her, and there's actually some really early sketches where she feels infinitely more One Piece than I think Uta ended up being. To me, she has a lot more personality in these sketches, whereas Uta's final design ended up stripping a lot of that away from her and streamlining it into something that I'd expect to see in any other anime. Let's say My Hero Academia. I've been told that that's an anime. But like Gunko, Uta's final design was also very top-heavy. Everything down to the waist was very meticulously detailed, and the other half is just bare legs, which I've gone on to discuss discover has been quite a topic, at least in the vocal online community. This is probably going to sound beyond stupid, but I didn't even realize that Gunko wasn't wearing pants at first. And I think that's because my head is still very much in egghead space, where no woman wore pants for 2 years. You got your Namis, your Robins, your Yorks, Bonnie, Stussy, etc. Not a pant to be seen among them, and hence why it's the only arc where Brooke didn't even need to ask to see any panties, because this man was already living the dream. But also, if Frankie and Senor Pink have taught us nothing else, it's that a lack of pants is never the problem. I don't think anyone would be complaining if Gunko was a bit less generic in everything else that she had to offer, and people are just jumping on the pants because they don't know how to express their thoughts in a way that doesn't involve making awful photoshops and claiming to have fixed the art. If that guy was Shanks, Loki would have reacted very differently to seeing him, considering that Shanks was the one who locked him up. So I thought that at first as well. But then I remember that Loki is blindfolded. At the moment, he's probably operating on some sort of Fujitora-style observation haki, where he can see and feel vague presences around him, cannot transform that information into a clear visual. Figarland Frank does speak, though, with his voice. And I guess this confirms that at the very least, he doesn't sound the same as Shanks, which, was going to be very possible. And I was actually thinking the other day about whether or not Shanks' voice actor would play Figarland Frank, because he definitely did in the anime episode where the man who we now believe is Frank went to speak with the Five Elders. But also, that's unfortunately probably not going to be an issue, because Shanks' voice actor, Shuichi Ikeda, has begun retiring from his iconic roles. The dude is 75 years old, and while Shanks hasn't been mentioned as of yet, this is the exact same path that Frankie's now retired voice actor went down. Kazuki Yao didn't immediately step back from everything. He started by retiring from his other characters before eventually announcing that he was going to leave Frankie as well. And as I mentioned before, this is just the reality of One Piece going forward. We've had voice actors on board with this show for more than 25 years now, so a huge amount of the cast are just aging, and we may very well get to the moment where the Holy Knights approach Loki in the anime and think, oh, no wonder Loki didn't recognize the voice, because that's not even the original Figarland Frank. With all of that said, I do think this manga moment is pretty telling for anyone still holding out hope that this is Shanks. There are a few of you, I see you. But Loki seems to identify people based on their intangible, unique presence, and this guy just doesn't feel like Shanks. So can we assume that Loki is the a certain pirate that Frank wanted to discuss with the elders? Maybe. A lot of it is dependent on whether or not Loki was considered a pirate during his active days. He does have a, quote, special bounty, so the world government might classify Loki as something else, but then again, he was a rampaging madman sailing all over the New World just for the sake of being a bit of a dick, so he definitely fits into that pirate box. In which case, what happens then? Frank goes to the Five Elders because he wants to talk about Loki, a certain pirate, potentially to recruit him, to suggest recruiting him into the Holy Knights, which is a suggestion I imagine the other Five Elders would have ignored. They would have scoffed, as they didn't seem to show a great deal of care that Frank was there. In fact, they were acting like he was an inconvenience, which would make sense if he did not have world noble heritage, as these elderly gents sit there and wonder why this glorified insect is taking up our precious tea time. It's arrogance, classic world government arrogance. But this suggestion about Loki, if he is indeed the certain pirate, was probably taken a lot more seriously after the Five Elders were defeated. And if so, that would be a pretty awesome twist. Because we've been speculating over who the certain pirate is since the moment that chapter dropped, and if the answer turns out that not only was the certain pirate a character we hadn't met yet, but even the person asking about said pirate wasn't even someone we'd properly met yet, then that would just be all sorts of mind screwy. One of the most iconic and dramatic moments of the Reverie arc, we didn't even know what the crap we were reading. And it's a good guess, but I still think there's a fairly high chance that the certain pirate was Shanks as well, although the more I think about it, the more low-key positive I'm becoming, especially if Frank was thinking of what they needed to eventually beat Shanks, and so he wanted to select someone who held a grudge against Shanks, which I think is a pretty good place to start. Probably goes without saying, but Blackbeard really embodies the whole thing about Nika as well. Not only is he a destroyer with his darkness and earthquake powers, but he liberated most of his crew from Impel Down and is one of the characters that laughs the most in the series. It's hard to find a time when he's on screen and not laughing, even when he's getting his ass kicked. I think there's definitely a good argument to be made for Blackbeard as well, although I would question the point about liberation, since Blackbeard does actively imprison people for the purpose of selling them into slavery to fund his wacky pirate pirate dreams. But he may also represent a counterforce to Nika, which has long since been speculated. The idea if there's a god of sun and light and general goodness, then there could also be a god of moon and darkness and general badness. Because at the very least, Luffy and Loki, they're all about freedom, but Blackbeard seems to want to take a more emu approach to things. He wants to rule the world. Blackbeard wants domain over everything. Jorl being stabbed in the head by a sword seems very similar to Shiki getting a steering wheel stuck in his head. It is a similar outcome, in that every time I see either Jorl or Shiki now, their bizarre misfortune does make me laugh. But I like the Jorl gag even better. I just love that he keeps saying, thankfully I was saved because I was wearing my helmet at the time, with the sword visibly going straight through his brain. And it's not just funny, but it's a very cool cultural aspect of Elbaf, or at least the old Elbaf, because I imagine that most people, they would get into some sort of panic about a blade being shoved in their heads, but not the warriors of Elbaf. They just get on with their lives unconcerned about the potential of death, and even inviting death to live with them, both metaphorically as a daily occurrence and very literally with a sword in the brain. This is how you portray the oldest living giant of Elbaf, because this dude would not have made it this far if something as simple as being impaled in the head would have killed him. Liam, I can't believe you talk about Loki resembling Usopp, but you don't talk about our lovable liar making up another tall tale to the giants by saying that he dealt the finishing blow to the legendary oars. So I can't believe I'm about to ask for this, but I really wish we got some reaction shots from the giants. I'm sure the anime will provide them plentifully, but one panel, just one panel of the giants staring up at Usopp in awe would have been fantastic. And look, what Usopp's doing here is quite dangerous, because the giants are in the presence of a legit Emperor of the Sea, and they might start to think of Usopp as someone who's in equivalency to Luffy. Because POV, you're a giant, right? For most of the existence of your species, there has been such a high focus in your society on behavior of honor and pride in combat, which means that you're not automatically gonna think or even suspect that someone's lying about their achievements in combat, because that's just not the honorable thing to do. And most of these giants haven't even left Elbaf. They don't know what other cultures are like. They might not even know of the existence of these lies of which I speak. So these giants now genuinely think that Usopp delivered the final blow to Oars, and this could backfire on him in a Tontata-esque situation, where Usopp made the Tontata tribe believe his lies about being a legendary heroic descendant of Noland. And once things get problematic, which it's going to be soon, once that happens, the giants are going to have pretty high expectations of Usopp. And I can only hope that he's able to deliver, that he can use being on the island of warriors and in the presence of warriors to summon the kind of courage and actions that he's been so rarely capable of in the past. Because right now he's on the island of his dreams, but he's still doing the same thing that he was doing right back at the dawn of One Piece, which is charming. As the commenter said, he's a lovable liar. But what I'm looking for is some evolution here. Something to show us that Usopp has really grown since those days of Syrup Village. And while I wait for that, there was also a really funny moment of Jinbei, where one of the giants says, "Wow, your skin's like really blue." And then there's this beautiful shot of Jinbei with an expression like he's trying to calculate the probability of racism occurring. And also another fun moment was Sanji interacting with the giant women, which is showing that this boy has some skills that he rarely gets credit for, as these are not the first locals he's impressed with his shenaniganry. Sanji was also extremely popular with the mermaids of Fishman Island and the women of Wano, who were lining up all through the flower capital just to get a taste of his soba. So Sanji continues to live the dream. At this stage, he could comfortably retire in a heaven of his choosing. Loki showing the John Wick mentality. Gunko gonna die hard. It is very John Wick, isn't it? What's that? You killed my dog, my big dog? Well, I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and destroy everything you know and love. Calling it now. Loki is going to be in the top 10 of the next character poll. I think top 10 is a big ask, but top 20, now that is well within the realm of possibility, because I'm liking Loki more and more with each passing chapter, and I think he has the potential to become a Katakuri-esque kind of character, one who fans can easily get on board with if he's a good guy at heart, but also someone who showcases some amazing action and really pushes Luffy, because that equation resulted in Katakuri being ranked in 14th place in the latest poll, which was the World Top 100, and took place years after Katakuri had faded from relevance. He has no right to be ranked that high. No right at all. Because the dude just sat in his safe space eating donuts for almost 900 chapters of One Piece, and in the space of half an arc, became one of the most beloved figures we never even knew we needed. And that's why I have pretty high hopes for Loki as well. Because I can feel that Katakuri or even higher potential, as did Luffy, which is why he went out of his way to take that trip to the underworld. What if the Tobi Roppo become Yamato's vassals? You see, that would be fun, because then Yamato would be properly going full Odin. Odin's journeys around Wano involved him collecting a series of misfits and outcasts, and even some characters like Ashura Doji who would have been considered a villain by the rest of Wano at the time. So if Yamato could rehabilitate the Tobiropo and channel their power for the good of Wano, then that could be a very pleasant ending, perhaps with Yamato being made into a daimyo of a region just like Odin was, which would also track with the Odin story, because it's only after he became a daimyo that he set out to sea with Whitebeard. I loved this chapter, it made me laugh a lot of times, but my favorite part was seeing Colin. Okay, so I didn't even remember that Colin was in this chapter. I missed this, and quite frankly, shame on me for doing so. I have one job, it's to look at the drawings of the funny pirates and talk about them, and I didn't do it. But here is the drawing in question. It is Colin having a lovely time at this feast, striking the iconic sun god, joy boy, Luffy, all of the above pose. And I refuse to believe that this is an accident, because everything just matches so perfectly. Even the fact that Colin's face is obscured. Everything except the mouth, which is a massive joy boy Nika grin. Now, I don't think we should read too much into this necessarily. I'm definitely not suggesting that Colin is another potential Nika, but maybe more that he embodies the spirit of Nika in the same sort of way that Bartholomew Kuma did when he always performed the special dance. Although then again, do not underestimate just how much potential Colin has to do things, because I do think there is a possible future where we look back at this panel and go, yep, it was all there. And maybe what's going to happen is that Colin will be the giant that one day inherits the sun god fruit, whether that be Loki's or even Luffy should bad death things occur to either one of them. And this could be foreshadowing Colin's worthiness to carry on the next generation. And I know I'm putting a lot into Colin stocks at the moment, my bank account is empty, but he's a child who's been directly inspired by both Luffy and Shanks, as well as the son of an allegedly great third pirate. So narrative nepotism favors Colin far, far more than most, if not all of the arc-specific children we've met so far. And if I've learned anything from this chapter, it's that I need to keep a closer eye on him, because Colin could end up becoming the future of this world.